I'm Tim Neubauer. Welcome to Training in the Metaverse. My co-host is Lance Losberg. How are you, Lance?
Doing good, Tim. How are you?
Good. I want to talk during this podcast about specific training scenarios. One of them is, for me, is confined space. When I have to train confined space, I'm curious how you would overcome some of the challenges I have.
Right.
It's really easy for me to tell people this is the procedure, but it's harder when I get to the actual confined space and I take them up to there. I don't want to put them in a confined space because that creates a hazard.
Right.
But I need them to be in there because conditions can change. You can find hazards that you didn't see. Now, I'll give you a great example. I go in there and as I walk in, everything's good. I'm using my gas meter, so it's not a permit-required confined space, but 5 minutes later, my gas meter goes off. Mm-hmm. I now have a hazardous situation. I need to evacuate the space. I don't want to put my students in that position. How would you overcome that in virtual reality?
So that's a great example because we can actually put them in that confined space. But we would go in with a 360 camera and we would shoot that exact confined space you want, and with everything that's in there, and they would be as if they were in there when they put on the VR headset and look around and do everything. There's a little bit of challenges on how we would do it, but we have various ways that we can shoot these environments, whether it be on robots and drones or on a helmet cam, various different ways. That's still up to us. We have creative ways to make that happen. But we can do everything that you had mentioned in there, including for the meter, we could have sound effects that give that indicator what it is, or we could actually show a meter in a hand or whatever it may be.
Right.
And when it goes off.
Beep, beep, yeah, you hear it when it goes off. There's no doubt about that. Mm-hmm. Okay, so when they're in there, if conditions could change, and then they'd be able to make the decision tree. That's great, so I don't have to be in there. Lockout, tagout, and for this one, this is probably one of the widest hazards, and it's one of the top 10 OSHA citations every year in general industry and construction is that you have to lock out a machine. And sometimes it's as simple as pulling the plug out of the wall and the energy is stopped. And other times I might have to put a lock or a block or something in 5 or 6 different parts of a machine so that if it started up, it wouldn't actually hurt me. Right. So it's a procedure, okay? Right. And it's a very in-depth procedure, and it has a check and a balance.
Okay.
And I need to train everybody consistently.
Right.
How can VR help me with that?
So there are a couple of ways you can actually accomplish that type of procedures. And one would be more visually. And that you are recognizing what you are or not supposed to be, and then maybe have a decision tree and be able to make the selections on what to do, what not to do, and then have it proceed from whatever your decision is, then the outcome comes next. The other one is we can physically, through using various techniques in virtual reality, is have you physically pick up a lock, so to speak, and then place it onto the place where it's supposed to be, or maybe, select whatever item it is.
Well, selecting the right lock is actually a really good.
That could be, yes.
Because there's different locks for different things. So that's great. Great. So if I was to take the topic of inspection, I know we talked about the walkthrough, we talked about the situational awareness, but I want to change the term inspection. If I was inspecting a piece of equipment, how could I be trained how to do that? Is that a procedural thing?
Well, let me ask you this: how do you do it in real life?
I would stand around and say, "Look at that! Look at that! Look at that! Look at that!" And then you would do it in virtual reality, and they would say, "Look at that! Look at that! Look at that!" So I answered my own question. That's a great one. I was involved in a forklift video several years ago, where we did some 360 filming. But I'm assuming the technology has advanced since then, and at that point we just filmed somebody driving down and hazards coming up.
Right.
What are some advances in technology of things we can do now?
The advancements are in multiple areas. We talked about hardware development and how that's coming along and moving into the future, and of course the economics of everything involved, the resolution, as far as how pretty the pictures are. It used to be everything was HD and then 4K, and now we're doing 8K and on up to 12K and even more depending.
Now I got to buy a new TV.
Yeah, but I mean, there's all these other nuances that we sit down and we discuss what you need, what's available, and then also the device which you're viewing on. Everything has to be compatible and work in place. But those are all other technical aspects of it. But there's also other processes that we can utilize, whether we're shooting in a 360 video environment, embedding graphics and hotspots and branchings to make it more interactive, or if it's going to be something that needs to be more game-like or more activity interacted, where you're actually physically moving something or you're moving yourself with the environment. So all these variables come into play from the beginning as far as what your needs and desires are and what your objectives are, and then of course the budget that's available to utilize for it.
It's the technology has certainly advanced, so the product is looking so much better. I struggle with this topic. I'm going to bring it up, and just because I don't have an answer, I want to be able to train fall protection. Now, for me, identifying a hole or guardrail that's not the right height, I think that we've already discussed hazard recognition. But if I was to give you a scenario of, let's say, inspecting a piece of equipment I wear to protect me if I fell, is there any scenarios that we could do with that, or is that just some technology we're going to have to use traditional?
Yeah, well, no. I mean, if you wanted to have a room full or a closet or room full of items that you know you need to have for your fall protection, which you need to wear or put on, those kinds of things, and we could have those there, and you could actually physically, point, click, or somehow activate and choose what it is you're supposed to have, and then you could look in a mirror basically and see if it's working, or if it's on or not correctly or not.
I like that. It's in the world of fall protection, there's and just in safety in general, the hierarchy of control is to engineer the process out. So by teaching them to solve the problem before they get to the problem is a huge benefit. The last one that I really want to talk about is actually a three-prong one, and it's got to do with fire protection. Okay. I need to be able to identify hazards and fix them. Plus, I also need to be able to put the fire out.
Right.
I know there's a lot of devices out there that let you simulate putting a fire out, but how can VR make this a more impactful training experience?
I can't speak from the either procedural or from being an expert in the field of how to prevent and put out a fire. I can only tell you from the expertise of creating virtual reality environments and the applications that we can create to follow whatever the procedures are today, to take in real life, to put them in virtual worlds or environments, to recreate those so that a trainee can physically feel as they're there. And it just depends, I guess, on to what level or what intricacies that need to be involved, whether it can be created in that way. 9 out of 10 times it can.
Okay.
I don't know if I really answered your question. But
I think you did, because you don't necessarily have to know the topic. We just need to know how to communicate, and I think that is just something, Lance, that you're fantastic at with your virtual reality and your company. I'm getting ready to wrap this up, and I don't want to say this is our last podcast in the training in the metaverse, but I just want to back up and recap a little bit what we've talked about in the last, 6-7 sessions. Right. We started out, remember, we talked about what is VR, and we covered that, and we talked about the risk and benefits. And as I'm walking down through here, if you have some good closing thoughts about what we need to do, please feel free to jump right in there. So then we talked a little bit more about the decision point. I call it the fault tree. Right. We talked about now as there is no better time than now. It's not going to get any different as technology evolves. We talked about the cost, which was a very frank conversation, and I appreciated the openness as we talked about the different tiers and whistles and buzzers. You can get as much as you want. We spent a little bit of time talking about the adaptation of VR in business and how to make that decision. So, as a CEO perspective, or from the HR or production process centric over there. We talked about the technology, the actual cameras, and we talked about the headsets and stuff like that. And then we talked about a lot of the topic content. Is there anything in closing that we haven't talked about in this whole time as I read that you say, hey, here's our parting shot. We're going to take a little bit of a break from filming these things. What do you want to say?
Well, I mean, you've covered a lot in a short period of time, and you've done it very well. And I guess having been doing this for 25 plus years, it's always kind of the same scenario of, we can pretty much do anything, just depends on when you need it and the budget. We can accomplish pretty much anything. And the beauty of that is it's still that way, but the time and the budgets are infinitesimally smaller than they were 25, even 10, even 5 years ago. So it's all coming together that way. And in the metaverse, actually, that in itself, as that progresses, it's just going to make the economies of scale even more efficient for everyone involved, and it makes it, better, faster, and cheaper. So it's a powerful tool.
It is, and I speaking from personal experience as a business owner, I see all the benefits of this and want to move forward with this. I'm Tim Neubauer. This is Training in the Metaverse, and this is Lance Losberg. Thank you.